Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you all. My name is Rani Haidar, and I'm humbled to be your MC this afternoon for this really important event. Inshallah, you can all hear me, and you all have you've had no trouble logging on and being a part of this program. This is a very important event. Alhamdulillah, our very own Windsor Islamic Youth Council was able to put this together, um, and uh, Alhamdulillah, during these unprecedented times, it's really important that we can come together and put on an event that of utmost importance. So thank you all, Jazakallah khairan, for coming out to this event, embracing uncertainty now in Ramadan and beyond. My dear brothers and sisters, it is no secret that we are all experiencing unprecedented times. And when I mean all, I truly mean all. Everybody, be it any corner of the globe, is going through very interesting times. And as we navigate these interesting times, it's more imperative and absolutely essential that, of course, first and foremost, that we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His perfect guidance. But then we must turn to one another and must come together as a community to present love and support for all of us. Which brings me to the premise of this event. We as the Islamic community have care for everybody, and we all know that navigating through these times is not easy. So, alhamdulillah, we have three excellent speakers, well knowledged and very involved in the community, who will be able to present and provide some advice and some tips and some recommendations for each of us, so that we can better succeed during these times. Um, so, alhamdulillah, this afternoon in this special webinar, we have Sheikh Yousef, Sister Hanaa Elmi, and Brother Tareq Tamr. And inshallah, they'll be teaching us and presenting to us how to embrace and live through this time of isolation. They'll be touching upon how we can deal with the anxieties and the uncertainties, and how we can become more optimistic and positive during these times. As well as our beloved month of Ramadan is literally around the corner. So inshallah, they'll be touching upon how we can make this Ramadan a special one, despite some of the traditions that we will not be able to participate in, perhaps such as communal iftars and tarawih and getting together. So inshallah, they'll be talking about how we can still um, soak up as much as we can during the month of Ramadan, and how we can experience, inshallah, the most amount of blessings during this blessed month. There's also a question and answer section. This gives you an opportunity to be interactive and to engage with the speakers. We'll be leaving that until the end of the program. But anytime throughout the webinar, if you do have a question, feel free to uh, input it in the chat section. Please indicate who you would like the question to be answered to, or if it's a general question. But if it is geared to a specific speaker, please indicate that. And inshallah, at the end of the webinar, we'll be able to answer your questions. So we'll be starting with our first lecture by Sister Hanaa Elmi. She'll be speaking about how to deal with the anxieties and the uncertainties of this time, as we navigate through these unprecedented experiences, and how to take care of ourselves, both mentally and physically. How to make sure that we are engaging in spiritual rightness, and how we can also make sure that our positive emotions are there, and uh, how we can live through and experience this time through a positive lens. So inshallah, I'll hand it over to Sister Hanaa, and like I said, please, if you do have any questions, make sure to type your questions in the chat so they can be answered at the Jazakallah khairan. And Sister Hanaa, whenever you're ready.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, everyone. Can you guys hear me? I hope. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, Ronnie. Okay, good. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First off, I just want to extend my sincerest gratitudes to our amazing organizers who have created the space and granted time for us to share, connect, and show up for one another. I think I can speak for all when I say that these are very trying times, not only spiritually, which is the overarching theme of today's discussions, but also for many, the past month has stretched and tested every facet of our well-being. So I just want to take a second to put out a message of reassurance out there that you are not alone. Just as Allah consoles the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran, and he says, "You have not been forgotten or forsaken," we too can take solace in those words. Author Miriam Hasna writes, "Every circumstance is divinely designed to teach or reveal something to us. And this pandemic is no different. So your feelings of grief, fear, anxiety are 100% normal, valid, and they are shared." I'm going to be touching on a couple of the ways that we can better acknowledge our needs and self-regulate near the end. But just in case you fade in and out or you have to leave for a minute here, I just wanted to make sure that I took this opportunity to say that we're wading through some very difficult times and you are under no obligation to have it all together. So take a second here to unload, even if it's just for this moment that we're all together this evening. Unload whatever you've been burdened with and just take a few deep cleansing breaths before we start. All right, so I want to preface our conversation around the virtues of isolation. That's the topic I was given, with this very important caveat. We need to be willing to be 100% truthful and courageously vulnerable with ourselves, to really self-reflect through all the different themes that we're going to be talking about tonight. And to illustrate this point, I hope you'll allow me to share a small story with you. Back in early March, when the news around this pandemic started to really unfold more daily, we started to see a level of chaos that I think many of us would have never anticipated. And I remember sitting with my grandfather as he was watching the news and asking him his thoughts about everything. And one thing that he said that really stuck out to me was that in Somali, they have this saying that says, which means a mere palm or hand can't obscure or block the sun. And the meaning he had being that you as a human can't cover or hide the light of the sun. You can attempt to dull its intensity with your hand, but you can't completely obscure it. And the implication being that the sun's light represents truth. So he continued explaining by saying, with all of the advancements in technology and myth of permanence around us, we've tried to unintentionally cover the truth, and perhaps we started to believe that we were completely self-sufficient, when in reality, we are completely under the mercy and control of Allah. And what he said, it stuck out to me for a number of reasons. One being that the Quran and our Islamic tradition as a whole constantly references light to be synonymous with guidance, clarity, truth, and justice. And another reason in particular being that I took that hand to symbolize all the ways in which I had fallen into that trap. Work, personal stuff, just all the things that I had used as a means to cover or obscure that light, or in other words, diverting my attention away from it. And now that hand had been removed, so to speak. So that light was shining uninhibited. So I had to ask myself a few really key questions. One, how had I been spending my time? Two, what was I prioritizing? Three, religiously and spiritually, where did I stand in the sight of Allah? And fourth, what was my overall truth? And in that moment, sitting there, I felt completely exposed in all the ways in which I wasn't meeting my own religious obligations because something else always seemed to get in the way. So I have to give that same internal conversation that I want you to have and ask you those questions. What is your truth? What are the things in your own life that have been obscuring that light? What priorities have been misplaced? And how can we all individually and collectively realign ourselves? And self-isolation has provided the space to genuinely explore these questions and to pull and to learn from the examples of our prophets and messengers. May Allah be pleased with them. We don't have to look very far into our own religious history to see that isolation has always served as a great catalyst for change. Allah in his wisdom shares with us the story of the Prophet ﷺ seeking seclusion in the cave of Hira, and specifically when he first received revelation. He shares with us Yusuf's fear in the bottom of the well, or Yunus being engulfed by complete darkness in the belly of the whale. Allah uses these stories to draw our attention to the fact that in these dire and trying situations, especially when we find ourselves alone or in isolation, these are in fact regenerative experiences. These are moments of growth and an opportunity to gain clarity and to connect with Allah. And for me, it's the story of Yunus that really strikes that chord for me. When I think about him being isolated from everyone and everything in what Allah describes in the Quran as a deep darkness. And it's in that moment that he cries out to Allah. And he says, "There's no God but you. Glory be to you. I have been of the wrongdoers." In that darkness, he finds clarity and truth and a deep connection with Allah. So continuing on the theme of isolation, anyone who follows Yousef Wahb on Twitter, you might have seen a powerful series of tweets that he shared last week. He shared an excerpt from a piece of text from Ibn Ata'Allah, which starts with, "Nothing benefits the heart like a little isolation, where the soul enters the realm of contemplation. So bury yourself in a distant fertile earth, because what is not buried will not grow, nor will it bear fruit." The imagery here speaks for itself, but the message undoubtedly asks that we take it upon ourselves to seek out moments of isolation so that we can stop, reconnect, and reflect on what our true purpose in this world is. This being more of an imposed isolation doesn't alter the benefits that we can draw from this time. So Imam Suhaib expanded on this text, and he says Ibn Ata'Allah shared four really important questions for self-reflection around the theme of isolation. So the first question he asks is, how is the heart going to be able to think about what's beneficial when the entire dunya is stuck and glued to its lens? So if you think of the heart as a lens, it may have been a substantial amount of time since we've questioned why it's been focused on particular things, or if there are things impeding our hearts from seeing clearly. Is that lens clouded? Are things in a heart prioritized correctly? And the things that we value most, they're housed in the heart. So what are we allowing to actually live and thrive in it? Two, he asks, how can someone travel or get closer to God when they are weighed down by their desires? He says that sins make us spiritually heavy. So in these moments of isolation, it is key that we shed those bad habits that we might have been not disciplined enough to drop otherwise. Allah has created the space and the conditions for this to happen. So for some, it might be spending large amounts of time with people who don't necessarily serve our best interests religiously. For some, it might be struggles with drug usage or social drinking. Whatever we may be grappling with, Allah has created the conditions where we are away from the many things that we've been struggling to avoid or stay away from otherwise. The idea being that this is a time to reorganize our patterns of being and to be more intentional about protecting ourselves from what is displeasing to Allah, so that we can lighten the weight of our sins before we have to stand before Him. And in some respects, it's a detox period. For many of us, is what we need, especially before Ramadan. The third question he asks is, how can someone hope of entering a real, meaningful relationship with Allah when they are imprisoned by their negligence? So the first station of spirituality is being awake and aware to the oneness of Allah, which then allows us to be diligent in what He has asked of us. So in this question, he prompts us to think about what areas of our faith and life we've been neglectful of. In Islam, we are taught to really appreciate the wisdom of contrasting experiences. We learn compassion when we experience hardship. We learn to be grateful when we have to go without. We learn to value our health through sickness. So now, when even the simplest joys feel almost sacred, we are learning that we haven't really appreciated all the things that Allah has blessed us with, whether it be time or health, or even more tangible blessings like shelter and healthcare. So isolation forces us to reflect on where we've been neglectful, asking ourselves if we've been protecting our prayers, how have we been connecting with our family members, supporting our communities, or caring for the planet in the ways that as Muslims we've been asked to. In what ways have we been neglectful of our own relationship with Allah? And I think prayer is such a key example, because in the comings and goings of our day-to-day, the story is usually that my prayers weren't on time because XYZ. And now, when so many of us are at home for extended periods of time, we can ask ourselves, are my prayers on time now? If the answer is no, we have to ask, where's the gap? And the last question he asks is, how can anyone hope to understand the true meaning of life if he or she has not repented? So here he's encouraging us to turn back to Allah in sincere and honest repentance, asking us to be truthful of our shortcomings, to be honest with ourselves in the ways in which we may have displeased Allah. And Guy Eaton describes repentance in his collection Reflections, which I love this quote. It says, "Repentance does not imply self-indulgent and self-pitying guilt. It means turning back to God when we turned away from Him and admitting the simple truth of the situation. As we turn, at the very moment at which we turn, He turns to us, and the barrier which we had willfully erected between him and us is dissolved. He was always there waiting. It was we who had made ourselves absent from him. So Allah has given us this chance to course correct in this time of isolation and to humbly return to him. So those are the 4 big questions that I hope some of us will take and kind of sit and marinate with. And now I want to switch gears a little bit and come at it from a mental health perspective. So we're in such a hyper-connected and efficiency-driven world. And this period of isolation has provided some with solace or a break. But I know it isn't lost on us that for many, this period of time has been especially difficult. Across the board, we've seen an uptick in anxiety, panic attacks, in depressive episodes. There's already a calling to our next great crisis after COVID, which is in the realm of mental health needs and supports. So I just want to reiterate what I said in the beginning, that these feelings of grief, anxiety, or fear are normal for everyone. But for some, it goes outside the realm of still being able to cope and function in everyday life. Mental and emotional labor can be extremely taxing, and it is paramount that if you feel you need support, that you reach out. Whether it's messaging a friend, whether it's phoning our local crisis center, whether it's signing up for single session therapy, there is no shame in extending a hand. And I want to share a way that I support my own mental health and to help myself better self-regulate. So I've been taught to use a tool that's modeled after a medicine wheel. And I think many of us might be familiar with what a medicine wheel is. And this particular medicine wheel that I use originates from the Southern Plains and Sioux First Nations. So essentially the model is a circle that's cut or divided into 4 equal parts. And each part is a dimension of health. So you would have one corner would be mental health, physical health would be the other, emotional health would be one, and the last would be spiritual. And for myself, each day I draw this circle and I write either a check-in or an actionable item that I have to do for that day with regards to each of those dimensions. And each section plays its role. And the beauty is that it's balanced. And as Muslims, we would consider that entire circle to be components of our overall religious well-being. And for yourself, you can do multiple circles in a day. You can do one for the week. You can use it as a check-in tool, which typically that's how it's used. You can ask yourself, how am I feeling mentally right now? How am I feeling physically right now? What supports might I need in this very moment? So physically, you might check in and say, I need movement. So I need to go for a walk, or I need grounding exercises. Spiritually, you might want to read Quran or take a moment to pray or listen to a podcast. Mentally, you might want to shut out or limit the amount of social media or news you're consuming every day. Emotionally, you might need to call a family member or a friend. Your needs are dependent on what Risma Minkum calls a health continuum. So she says her health continuum, for all of us, we all have our own, it has innumerable points between utter brokenness and total health. But the interesting part is the transient nature of life doesn't allow for us to remain stagnant in one point for prolonged durations of time. Physical health, spirituality, emotional assuredness may look very different from day to day or week to week, especially as we move through this period of social distancing and isolation. So based on your own unique circumstances, I hope that we can all agree that we can meet ourselves wherever we currently are and be truthful and honest about what we genuinely need, and there being no shame about it. So in ending, our spiritual and religious tradition sees moments of isolation as an opportunity to be like that seed that grows. Just as there are seasons in life for planting and harvesting, we are in that in-between season of quiet sprouting, of time and space to just stop, reflect, reconnect, and reevaluate this new course. And for me, having early spring coincide with everything that's happening around us, I think is divinely designed, because all the trees and flowers and plants are struggling to come back to life. And I think many of our hearts are doing the exact same thing. So if you forget everything I've said at this point, I just have 2 calls to action for all of us, for myself and everyone who's listening in. The first one is to use and memorize the words of Yunus alayhi salam, and to think of him in that moment of complete isolation and compare ourselves to that darkness that he was in. And he had no one to rely on but Allah, and Allah answered his call. And the verse, it's Surah Anbiya, verse 87, and La ilaha illa ant, subhanaka inni kuntu min al-dhalimin. There is no God but you, glory be to you, I have been of the wrongdoers. And the second call to action that I ask is protecting your well-being is paramount. Your emotions are internal messengers, and they point directly to a need. So you have to check in with that need. If you need to reach out, speak up, write, pray, go for a walk, put your phone on silent, be still. Whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and to be well is really important during this time. So finally, everyone's like, this is a lot. We're in the midst of a global emergency. And the word emergency stems from the Latin root emergere, which is to rise, to bring forth, and most powerfully to bring to light. And just like the words of my grandfather that I shared with you at the beginning, this is a moment for us to shed some light on the true realities of this dunya and the roles that we play. I pray that everyone has a safe, healthy, and accepted Ramadan, and that Allah fortifies our hearts so that we may meet Him doing which is pleasing to Him. Allah is all-powerful, and may we continue to turn to Him, place our trust in Him, and seek protection and repentance from Him alone. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Hanaa, for that amazing reminder. I actually had to leave halfway through your speech to go get a notebook. So I encourage everybody that's listening, take a minute, go get a notebook and a pen or a pencil, and take down some notes, because there's a lot of great information that's being presented to us. I particularly loved how you made the parallel between our time and the circumstance of Prophet Yunus. It's no secret that he had, a very trying experience in the belly of the whale, and he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another component that stood out from your presentation or speech was how unbelievably important mental health is. I like you read that after this all ends, the next chapter is going to be a mental health epidemic, and how are people going to build themselves back up, so that their mental health and wellness is in a good condition. So very, very important. And I can't stress enough, if you don't have a pen and paper in front of you now, go get one, because there's a lot of great information. That advice about the medicine wheel is top notch, and something that inshallah I'll be looking to incorporate, and will be suggesting and advising my friends. And before I introduce our next speaker, again, if you do have a question, be it for Sister Hanaa or for any of our other speakers, make sure to input it or type it in the chat, so that we can compile, and then at the end of the session present these. So let's keep the ball moving. Let's introduce our next speaker. Really no stranger to our community, Sheikh Yousef, who has always been involved with the youth, and with speaking about our experiences, be it in Ramadan and out. We'll be talking, inshallah, about how we can overcome the spiritual laziness that is associated with this quarantine and with this time, and how we can perfect our acts of worship, and how we can make the most of this Ramadan, because I'm sure this is a Ramadan unlike any other that we've ever experienced. So I will pass the Zoom screen over to Sheikh Yousef, and whenever you're ready, Sheikh.
جزاك الله خير راني، بارك الله فيك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين، سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين، وبعد. جزاكم الله خيرا جميعا. And I really need to thank the brothers and sisters in the Windsor Islamic Youth Council for this beautiful opportunity, and I would actually extend the meaning of this gratitude for the organization of this event to the concept that even if we are meeting virtually, that doesn't reduce the value of this to be a majlis, or to be a session, or an assembly of ilm, an assembly of dhikr, an assembly of mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I hope, and I wish, and I think, inshallah, and I believe as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would, inshallah, consider our majlis and our assembly to be one of these majalis that are mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same hadith that talk about the assemblies of dhikr and the assemblies of ilm, inshallah, would apply to us even if our existence together is virtual, but we are still meeting, alhamdulillah, with this technology that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. Beautiful hadith reported by Imam Muslim rahimahullah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a mobile squads or groups of angels who have no other work but to follow the assemblies of dhikr. And once they find such assemblies in which there is a dhikr or mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they set in them. And some of them surround the others with their wings. You know, we have this visualization of angels to be with wings, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that in the Quran about them. So they would surround the gatherings with their wings until the space between them and the sky would be filled and covered by the wings of the angels. And when they disperse after the assembly is done, they go upward to the heaven and they have this beautiful conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a beautiful long hadith that I would just highlight part of it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask the angels, and he's best informed about them, وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِهِمْ, as he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where have you come from? So they say, we come from your servants upon the earth who had been reciting Subhanallah, I've been saying Alhamdulillah, I've been saying La ilaha illallah, I've been saying Allahu Akbar, all these different kinds of dhikr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would ask the angels, so what do they beg of, what do they beg of me? So the angels would say, they are asking for Jannah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, have they seen my paradise? Have they seen my Jannah? Why they're asking for something that they've never experienced it or seen before? And they would say no. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell them, what would it be if they were to see my Jannah? And then the angels would say, yeah, but, or they would just proceed saying they seek your protection. And he would say, against what? They seek my protection. And they would say, from the hellfire. And they say, have they seen my hellfire? Why are they seeking protection from something that they did not see? This is the meaning of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the hadith. And they would say, no, they did not see the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, what would it be if they were to see my hellfire? And then the hadith goes on, and they would say, they are begging for your forgiveness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, I grant pardon to all of them, and I confer upon them what they ask for, and grant them the protection against the hellfire. So it's a beautiful hadith, but when we read it, we have to visualize it in a kind of a physical sense, that we need to have this actual presence together to imagine the angels on top of our heads, instead of us being now in this actual distance physically. But I believe, again, and I wish and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to still have this hadith apply to us in this gathering, inshallah, and the angels would be covering all of us, inshallah, from the top of our heads, inshallah, until the sky or the heaven, inshallah. There are just multiple bullet points that I really would like to share about this topic. There are a lot of things that can be said about this problem that we are facing, or about Ramadan, of course. The first one is the very common question that everybody asks about: how should we view this? Is it a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it a punishment from Allah? What is actually interesting when I thought about this question right now is the title of the event is uncertainty. So we have a kind of uncertainty thinking about this question as well, because you'll find multiple answers to this question. Some people would view it as mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think if we ask this question to each one of us who is attending right now, I think he or she would be able to give some rationale or justification for why he or she views it to be a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of us would view it to be a punishment from Allah, that people have been doing a lot of bad things. There's corruption and evil all over the world. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing us as he punished people before us. And yes, the Quran is full of things that would support that. And the Sunnah is full of things that would support that as well. But it looks like it's a multi-perspective issue. And we can view it in multiple ways, that yes, it could be actually mercy, it could be punishment. And this is not only our understanding of the text of the Quran or the Sunnah, even the Sahaba and the companions, the way they would interact with these crises that when they happen to them, you'll find multiple things. This famous plague that happened to the companions shortly after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of them use the word mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of them imply the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing people for what they've been doing. So there's a kind of a positive uncertainty about this question. There's a kind of a spiritual uncertainty. How should we view this? How should we understand this affliction or trial that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has afflicted us with? The problem is, I said positive uncertainty, because regardless of the way you want to view it, you cannot be certain about it. And you cannot delve so much into the causes of this or into the explanations of this if you view one of the two opinions. So if you think it's a punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't think anyone would have absolute right to say this is because of this particular problem that we did, or what people did specifically, because that would be objected by so many different scenarios and theological and spiritual questions that would actually object and disagree with this view. But when we say mercy versus punishment, it's our general spiritual understanding of the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the actual question is a reflection, is we are trying to ponder on the qadr, right? And we are trying to ponder on something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done. And generally speaking, you cannot really identify the causes or the wisdom sometimes of the actions or the af'al of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want a deeper demonstration of this, try to do a kind of a general extrapolation over the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and think of the way or the attitude. There is a pattern of attitude that I think you would find in the ahadith in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is interacting with natural phenomena. So there's an interesting hadith that Sayyidah Aisha, our mother, radiallahu anha, she narrated that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would see a cloud that looks as if it's bringing rain, he would get so nervous. So he would go in and out. He would go back and forth. He would يدخل ويخرج, leave the house and come back, go in and out, walk in and out like multiple times. And he's very nervous. And she said, like, we're used to the strength and the power of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And then she said, once the rain starts, he feels so relieved out of a sudden. So she noticed that happening a couple of times. So she asked him, like, I don't understand, why are you doing this? So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what would make you know that it is not what the people of Hud have said? And what the people of Hud have said, it's actually an ayah in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about their transgression and sins and their arrogance, committing all these crimes and not caring about the punishment or the potential punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until Allah sends them the punishment as rih and rain, as wind and rain. It was a blowing wind that booted them out, basically themselves and their buildings. So when the punishment started to approach them, it was in the natural phenomena of clouds. So the ayah says, and it's a very beautiful ayah in Surah Al-Ahqaf, فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهُ عَارِضًا مُسْتَقْبِلَ أَوْدِيَتِهِمْ. When they saw clouds approaching the valleys, قَالُوا هَذَا عَارِضٌ مُمْطِرُنَا. They said, yeah, those are the clouds that are bringing us rain. So even up until the last moment of their lives, they are still very arrogant and they are that much certain about the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. قَالُوا هَذَا عَارِضٌ مُمْطِرُنَا. They said, this is what we've been promised with because Allah loves us, right? So the ayah responds to them right away after they say this, بَلْ هُوَ مَسْتَعْجَلْتُمْ بِهِ. Rather, this is what you have been hastening towards. رِيحٌ فِيهَا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. It's a wind that is full of severe punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the link that the Prophet, he is the Prophet, right? So I don't need to highlight this. And he's the most beloved one to Allah and the best of human beings and the best of all the creatures that Allah created. And he's actually scared, right? He's spiritually scared and he would never be scared, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. Nobody knows the soldiers of your Lord except him. And we in Islam, we view all these natural phenomena and things that Allah decrees to be part of the concept of the soldiers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. We send those signs to scare people sometimes. So this divine intimidation that we need to develop spiritually in a positive way, of course, not to be panicking or to be like very overstressed about this, because Islam always tries to keep you in this balance, right? So this is the way the Prophet ﷺ would do it. And he was never that person that he would be very desperate about things. He has, in the same time, contentment with the qada. He has the same time trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has at the same time hope in the mercy and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we notice a pattern of dealing with the natural phenomena like this. Even when the solar eclipse happened, he said, and people started saying, yeah, it happened because Ibrahim has died. Ibrahim was his son, and it was the same day that the sun was actually eclipsing. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, inna shamsa wal qamara ayatani min ayatillah. And look at, and I don't need really to highlight the wrong discourse talking about science versus Islam. This is not the point. The point here is trying to grab you spiritually to these signs, right? To these signs, not science, right? So he says, "Inna shamsa wal qamara ayatani min ayatillah." The sun and the moon are signs of the signs of Allah. لا ينخسفان لموت أحد ولا ينكسفان لحياته. Or he said the opposite. He said the eclipse, this phenomena does not happen for the death of someone. So what he says here is that those are signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One version of the hadith, he says, آيَتَانِ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُخَوِّفُ اللَّهُ بِهِمَا عِبَادَهُ. So those are signs from Allah to scare people. So he's instilling in the minds of the Sahaba that When you see this natural phenomena that is beautiful, and we go see it, and we observe the sun and the movement of the moon and all these things, it's very beautiful to reflect this. But this has to be to reflect on this. But this has to be reflected in your own self spirituality, that this is won by the qadr of Allah, and I need to ponder why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing this. This makes us understand the concept that I think we all are familiar with, of the hope and fear, al-khawf wa raja. Most of these hadith, when you put them together, they are trying to balance this very natural side of you, that yes, you need to be scared of the punishment of Allah that might happen even here. You might get the punishment upfront in advance in this life, because this is what happened to people before. We're talking about things that did happen in history. And at the same time, you are very hopeful in the unlimited ultimate mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believing in both is easy, but keeping the balance is very hard. This is the problem. That's why, you know, the discussion about which one comes first, hope or fear, and then the scholar said it's like the two wings of the bird, and all this beautiful discussion. Yeah, the balance is actually the most difficult part. That's why, alhamdulillah, we've been listening to lectures throughout our lives. We've been attending khutbahs and Jumu'ah, and we've been attending a lot of Islamic events, right? Yes, now we are for the first time tasting the bitter taste of being deprived of actual presence of one of these things that we used to take for granted before. This is a sign that this thing might be taken away from you in a blink of an eye. It's not something, yes, Allah has blessed us with this alternative, but it does not feel the same, right? We are trying to convince ourselves that it is the same, but it is not. Just we need to admit this fact, but we admit it and reflect on it, not to be depressed about it, but to understand, yes, that was actually a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we just drive or walk to the mosque to listen to a couple advice or to a couple lessons from whoever to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or about the Quran. What I'm trying to say is all the spirituality and the religion that we have been trying to learn all of our lives, they have to come up right now. Spirituality is there to come up and to show in times of crisis. You pray for these times. You fast for these times. You make dhikr for these times. You read Quran for these times. If you cannot challenge these times, so there's a problem. The root cause is actually your spiritual connection, right? If you never had this real understanding of the essence of the prayer to be something that all your life revolves around it, and you do not feel it right now, you do not feel the reflections and the manifestations of the connection of the prayer nowadays to face these challenges that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afflicted all people with, that means there was a problem with the spirituality to begin with, right? Spirituality is not there just to attend a lesson or to read a book or to watch a lecture. It's there to come up, to show, to be reflected and manifested in these times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afflicts us with such a crisis or a problem. A second or third point would be the point of the isolation that we are all forced to have. And it's so interesting now that everybody's talking about it and talking about the merits of isolation. And it's sometimes positive to be just alone and to have just some personal time and some private time to reflect more, to advance your knowledge, probably to finish your unfinished work that have been hanging for so long. All these to-do lists that we are trying to fill our times with, and to view it as a positive thing that we are isolated. And actually, Imam al-Ghazali, in his masterpiece on spirituality, the Reviving of Islamic Sciences, he wrote a chapter about the merits of seclusion, Fawaid al-Uzla. And he listed 6 merits of the seclusion. He said, in the seclusion, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And he missed a lot of things that it's hard to attain or to acquire when you are mingling much with people. When you are a very social person, you cannot acquire most of these things as easy, at least, as when you are in seclusion. And that gives us relief that, yeah, alhamdulillah, we have this opportunity, so we should view it like this. Yes, in the next chapter, he talked about another 6 or 7 merits of being a social person and of mingling with people. So you think, okay, he just told us that there are a lot of merits about seclusion, and now he's telling us, yeah, but you need also to interact, because the Prophet said, الَّذِي يُخَالِطُ النَّاسَ وَيَصْبِرُ عَلَىٰ أَذَاهُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الَّذِي لَا يُخَالِطُهُمْ وَلَا يَصْبِرُ عَلَىٰ أَذَاهُمْ. The person who mingles and interacts with people and he endures their harms and their problems is better than the one who does not interact with them and does not endure their problems and harms. So it is not about which one is better. It's about, number one, having the balance between both, because you know what fuels your heart spiritually. And number two, it's your spiritual adaptability with the situations. And this is something very beautiful about our spiritual tradition. And I would take it as a transition to the last point of Ramadan. It's very beautiful about our spirituality that the various options and venues of spirituality is huge in Islam. from so many different ways. And everyone has his or her own key to spirituality that the person can know himself or herself. يصلح كل إنسان أو ما يصلح لإنسان لا يصلح لغيره. Sometimes one spiritual venue works for you, but it does not work for the other person. That's why scholars use the word remedy, the word medication, the word ilaj to imply that it's a remedy for something, but a ilaj or a prescription of a medication does not work for everyone, right? Even if some of us would share the same symptoms, but sometimes does not work for everyone. So some people connect more through siyam, some people connect more through salah, some people connect more through dhikr, through Quran, through sadaqah, all these things. We have the basics that all of us have to share to establish a large base of devotion to Allah as a Muslim community in general. And of course, the other wisdom, like establishing some social and communal merits to save the community at large. But the main reflection is individual. And then beyond that, there are a lot of voluntary things that you are highly recommended to do in Islam. So you have to fast at least 30 days a month, a year, I mean. And then the rest of the year, you have a lot of different days that you are highly recommended to fast and to observe siyam. Same thing with the salah, same thing with paying donation or sadaqah, beyond the zakah, and so on. So this is the beautiful thing, because we are different. And what boosts up our spirituality is actually different as well. And again, that's why universal answers in spirituality is something very tricky, and something that I always reflect on, that just a universal answer for a spiritual question does not actually work. It's more of an individual-based thing, right? It's actually sometimes more restricted than the fatwa. We say in fatwa, in fiqh, that fatwa is very particular for a single person, a single circumstance, and a single situation, a single time, and all these factors that influence the issuing of a fatwa. Sometimes a spiritual fatwa would apply to the same thing. So when we think of Ramadan as a very beautiful opportunity, it's actually a great blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like brought this affliction or trial or crisis that short time before Ramadan, because we are weak and we need a lot of strength to face it. And Ramadan is one of the most beautiful opportunities to face it. We are scared, which is something very legitimate. We are worried, which is very legitimate, whether over ourselves or over the people we love around us. Something very legitimate and something very naturally valid, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we are weak. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that though we have a lot of shortcomings, but we need something to boost us. We need something to encourage us from time to time to connect with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when He decreased the month of Ramadan to come soon, and we know about the month of Ramadan as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إذا دخل رمضان فتحت أبواب السماء وغلقت أبواب الجهنم. That when the month of Ramadan comes or starts, the gates of the heaven will be open, and the gates of the hellfire will be closed, and the devils will be chained. وصفدت الشياطين. And in this riwayah or narration, he said the gates of heaven will be open, but actually in a different version he said the gates of Jannah will be open. So in one version he says فتحت أبواب السماء, and in the other one he said فتحت أبواب الجنة. And there's no contradiction actually between both, because one of the meanings of the gates of the heavens are open is that they're open to receive the dua. So your dua is more likely to be received by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not just that, it's a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that implies that He's giving you a kind of a permission that go ahead and make dua. It's as if like there is the reception of dua is actually ready, because the dua ascends to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in Surah Fatir, إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ. To Him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ascends the good speech. And then He said something that helps this good speech to be actually ascended. He said, وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. The righteous work raises it. It, in this ayah, refers to the good speech, and part of the good speech is the dua, right? So if the good speech ascends to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and dua, of course, is part of the good speech, and then but you need something to lift this dua up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a main thing that would lift your dua is your righteous work. And one of the best times you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the month of Ramadan. And then He offered you this specific or this special grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the devils will be actually chained, which is a great blessing, because we are in the dunya is a big place, is you are in a big test in this life. This entire life you view it as you are writing your exam. And you are sitting right now writing your exam, but it's that very long exam that starts since you reach the age of taklif, age of puberty, until you die. This is your time of this exam. During this exam, you have 5 different kinds of supervision that are supervising your answers. So the first one is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's watching you. He knows the secrets and what is even more hidden, as the Quran says. Right? وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He's with you wherever you are. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. We are closer to him than his jugular vein. All these different verses that talks about the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of him watching us and watching our work. So this is the first kind of supervision that you have. The second one is the angels of Allah. The second kind of supervision. وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحَافِظِينَ كِرَامًا كَاتِبِينَ. And appointed over you are keepers. They're noble and they are recording what you do. يَعْلَمُونَ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. And there are multiple ayat that say this. Imam ibn Hajar, he commented and he said, Hajar al-Asqalani, that by induction and extrapolation, we found out that with every single one of us as a human being, there are 21 angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have appointed. There are the angel in the right hand and the angel in the left hand to write down the good and the bad deeds. There's the angel that is with you all the time, Al-Qareen. There are the angels of the limbs of the body, Malaikatul Jawarih. There are the angels who attend the assemblies and the gatherings of people, as the hadith that I introduced with, who turns among people, and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels. Number 3, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is one of the kinds of supervision that we have, because each prophet is responsible to be a witness over his followers on the day of judgment, shaheed, as the Quran says. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be a witness over us, and he chooses all of us to be witnesses over the rest of the nations, as he says in the Quran about us, which is something specific that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And he's the most upright and trustworthy witness, and you cannot appeal against him, right? لا تطعن شهادته. You cannot say, you cannot argue with his witness or testimony on the day of judgment. And he knows now, while he is in his grave, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our actions, because he said that our part of our deeds will be presented to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he feels good about our good work and he feels bad about our bad work. Allah says, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. There has come to you a prophet from your own selves, from your own kind. عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ, which is a very beautiful word, that grievous to him what you are suffering from. حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. He's so concerned over you. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. And to the believers, he is the most kind and the most merciful. And it's very interesting that he differentiated between al-hirs, between his concern over us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and between his kindness and mercy, right? Because when he thought about the kindness and the mercy, he thought about only the believers. But when he thought about concern, that he's concerned over us, he made it more universal. Harisun alaykum. And alaykum here, it's universal. He's concerned over you people, right? But his kindness and mercy is maybe more caring towards the believers in him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he is still concerned over everyone else. He was concerned over the non-Muslims. He wanted everyone to believe, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wanted everyone to become a Muslim. He wanted all the people who are distant to come back, right? He wanted everyone who was away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come back. And we should have the same attitude with people as well. Our concern has to be extended to everyone around us. And I'm not saying that kindness and mercy has to be excluded for Muslims, but I'm saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is implying in this ayah that his concern is still universal for all people that Allah created. And yes, of course, he would have extra mercy and kindness to the ones who believed in him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he would like only the good to happen to us, right? He said, مَا يَكُنْ عِنْدِي مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَلَنْ أَدَّخِرَهُ عَنْكُمْ. He said, whatever wealth I have, and you can understand it as good in general, I will not withhold it from you. The fourth kind of supervision, and I will conclude with less than these 5 supervisions. So I said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The fourth one is the Muslim community. There is this raqaba of mu'mins, or of Muslimin. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day sitting with his companions, and there was a janaza that passed by him and the companions. And he was silent, but the Sahaba started praising this person that the janaza was passing by with. The dead person who the janazah were going to bury. And then he didn't comment, but once they finished and the janazah passed away, he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wajabat. He said, it has become true. It's right. And that's it. And then another janazah passed on later, and the same people in the same gathering, they started condemning and criticizing this person, not in a bad way, but they're saying, a'udhu billah, like this is not the type of person that we would like to know. And that's not a kind of an evil or backbiting, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said sometimes a person would die and that would be a mercy for even the trees and the environment. This he said that sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mustarihun wa mustarahun minhu. So and we need to have, sorry for the tangent, but we need to have this balance between not being judgmental and at the same time to be real and to understand that there are right or wrong in this life. So he said the same thing when they condemned the other janazah, and he said, wajabat, it has become certain. So the Sahaba said, like, Ya Rasulullah, you said the same thing about the two situations. And he said, Antum shuhada'ullahi fil ard. You are Allah's witnesses in earth. Which implies that there is the communal approval of something in general, of course, the communal approval of something or endorsement of something should be taken seriously, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put some barakah in the majmu', in the collective communal opinion of Muslims. It is something that is very valued in Islam. And a Muslim understands that, yes, there's this obligation of amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar that keeps us all straight, that set us all right, that when we fulfill it, or we try to fulfill it, at least as whole, as the community in general, that makes me feel that there is the raqaba, there's the supervision of the community that I have to take consideration, that I have to take into consideration, that I have to be aware of, that it's one of the rule of the community in Islam. We're not individual human beings that we live in separate vacuums. We live together. And there is a huge communal part or rule about this. The last supervision, and I'm sorry if I went over time, I'm not sure, to be honest, but this is the last point, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Muslim community. The fifth one is your own self. Raqabatul insani ala nafsi. You have a kind of a supervision over your own self. And the Quran was beautiful talking about this, because he said, Balil insanu ala nafsihi basira. Rather, man against himself will be a witness. Man or woman, of course. Walau alqa ma'adhira. Even if he presents his excuses, because you know, right? That's why on the Day of Judgment, you really cannot deceive anyone. Regardless of how many excuses you want to bring, doesn't matter, because you know what is happening in your heart. It's all of this, all of these resources of information, of guidance, of nasihah, of all these things, they are pouring in one pocket, right? In one space, which is the space realm of your spirituality in your heart. So as much as you embody these things in your life, as much will be your accountability on the Day of Judgment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your appearances and your physical characteristics, as the Prophet ﷺ said. He wants your heart. He looks at your heart and looks at your actions. So Ramadan is a beautiful opportunity for this. And that's a longer topic, but these 5 supervisions, just to connect it to the point of Ramadan, is that the best time you are dealing with these 5 supervisions, because you are writing your exam, right? The supervisions are over you when you are writing your exam. The best time you can deal with these supervisions is in Ramadan. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would find in the Quran and the Sunnah, and you can actually do this homework, that there is something specific or special about Ramadan that deals with one of these 5. That's why Ramadan is a unique ibadah. Siyam is a unique ibadah. It's the most sincere ibadah, the most thing that you only can know this. You only can feel it. You only can experience it. No one else can watch it or see it. So it's the most difficult question with these 5 supervisions, because it's the most concealed one in your heart. That's why it's very special when it comes to Ramadan, how you deal with these 5 supervisions over us, that again last from the time we are born, but specifically when we reach the age of taklif until we die. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us live until we witness the month of Ramadan. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ni'mah of worshiping Him and devoting our times and our actions, all of them, to be sincere for His sake, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يبلغنا رمضان وأن يعيننا على طاعته وذكره وشكره وحسن عبادته. جزاكم الله خيرا. Again, I apologize if I went over time. I'm really not sure if I did. جزاكم الله خيرا. Ronnie would let me know right now. بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam. Sheikh Yousef, you can never go over time.
جزاك الله خير.
Always the speeches and the advices and the information that you give us is always well received, and if we could, we'd have you on forever. Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yousef, for that very important presentation and talk. For me, a couple of things that stood out. First and foremost is that the spirituality in Islam, or the concept of it in our religion, is not a one-size-fits-all. There's different avenues and there's different actions that each of us could take, and perhaps each of us are more attached to, that allows us to arrive, inshallah, to the blessings and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, those supervisions and those relationships that we have in our life, and how Ramadan is the perfect time to really perfect the relationships and the supervisions that we have, and that we should be cognizant that we're not ever really alone. I know the word isolation has been used a lot today, but we are never truly alone when we have a great community like ours, inshallah, if you guys have the opportunity to be with your family and your loved ones, and of course with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. He's one of his mercies is having the mercies of having the angels around us and listening to us, and I don't think that should be taken for granted. So jazakallah khairan again, Sheikh Yousef, for that incredible speech. Last but definitely not least, we have Brother Tareq Tamr, who's going to be talking a little bit about how we can be efficient and effective during our quarantine and during these interesting times. Inshallah, he'll be talking about productivity, how to get things done, and how we can be successful, inshallah, spiritually, academically, and as well as personally, be it with our family and with our current situation. So I will give the virtual mic over to Brother Tariq, and whenever you're ready.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you guys hear me? Just want to double check. I'm going to assume that's a yes. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So, jazakumullah khair, Hanaa and Sheikh Yousef, you guys did a phenomenal job, and there isn't really much more for me to say. Subhanallah. They say, leave the best for last. In this case, it's the situation where everybody already got everything that they needed to get. And so now this is the boring stuff. When I was first told the topic of productivity, my first reaction, my gut reaction was, productivity. It is not a fun topic right now. And I think we're going to get into why that's the case. But I think one of the key elements about it is that right now a lot of people are going through a hard time, and so the last thing people are thinking of is, okay, yes, it's time for me to work. But that's why I really want to try to use this conversation right now, inshallah, to kind of reframe essentially productivity and the way that we think about it. So the first thing that I want to say is the way that we look at the world, the way that we look at ourselves. This makes a big difference about our internal state and eventually then what comes out of it. And so I want to kind of just use that phrase, that idea of your personal narrative, the way that you think about yourself, and just use that to actually just bring that directly to the issue right now of, the coronavirus, COVID-19 and whatnot. This is something that objectively has a start and it has a finish, right? This virus, at some point it began, at some point it's going to, at some point it began, and at some point it's going to come to an end. But everybody has their own story about the coronavirus. Everybody has the moment that they first heard about it, the moment that they first took it seriously, the moment that kind of it really hit them. And maybe for some of us, that hasn't even happened yet. But so it's an interesting way to show that one objective thing that happens in the world can have many different stories associated. And even right now, when you take into consideration the fact that there are so many people who have either been laid off or furloughed, or for whatever reason they can't continue in their school, they can't continue in their job, where they have now new difficulties added to their life. And at the same time, there are people who this is essentially maybe a vacation. Maybe for some people, they're just, it's time off of school. They're just hanging out at home. They're just, watching movies and whatever. Now, even with that being said, though, there is still obviously some, negative emotions for a lot of people, but the degree is very different, right? For a lot of people, this just really isn't the life-shattering thing that it is for other people. So thinking about it first from that perspective, remembering the fact that everybody has a different story, and then reassessing, طيب, how is it that we can manage this story then? Because the Quran is one book, right? The Prophet ﷺ seerah, his story, that is one story. And so how could we take these lessons and say these lessons are supposed to apply for everybody, right? And I want to think about a question right now. When we think about productivity, when we think about what our goals are supposed to be or what they are, it's usually associated with, or at least for most people, what career you're going into, what education you're trying to pursue. Being productive is tied to what it is that you're trying to basically contribute to this world, right? That's your commitment. Even people, for example, who they don't really care about school, at the end of the day, they do view it that it's an obligation, for example, for themselves to go to school, because that's what they're trying to do to eventually, put food on the table. So this is viewed as an obligation, whereas faith, deen, religiosity, whatever you want to call it, it's considered secondary, it's considered optional. It's considered something that is, I'll take care of it once everything else is in place. Now, I want to just share a hadith that was narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. She said that no calamity, she said that the Prophet ﷺ said no calamity befalls a Muslim, but that Allah expiates some of their sins because of it. Even though it were a prick he receives from a thorn. So essentially, every single thing that you go through, no matter what it is, any sort of difficulty, it's going to be, inshallah, a means of forgiveness. And so what we know now objectively is, even if you don't care about deen, even if you don't care about religion, this difficulty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put upon you, this is now a means of forgiveness for you. Everybody got that right now, inshallah ta'ala. Every believer, this is what they've been called to. They've been called now to forgiveness. Because this is a difficulty in many different ways. Even if you didn't lose your job, you might be at home, really bored. You might be at home really, lonely or depressed or tired, missing your family, missing your loved ones, maybe somebody that is sick, maybe you want to go out. There is now constraints on you that weren't there before. Those constraints by their nature is now a means, inshallah, for earning forgiveness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already called you to him. That's the first part. So framing this, right, it's not your choice right now about, well, do I want to be productive or not? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already called you there. And so there's already now a step towards productivity in your faith that has been made. Something that you might have considered secondary or optional, it has now already been put upon you. Alhamdulillah. Of course, we can go into the long conversation about is this, a punishment? Is this not? And I think Sheikh Yousef covered that extremely beautifully, right? And so I want to go now to the next point, though, because we already established that these constraints, they're increasing for a lot of people negative emotions. We want to tie that in now directly to how negative emotions work in relation to productivity. Straight up, negative emotions for a lot of people, they will end up, if you're not able to reframe them and manage them correctly, inhibiting your ability to be productive. There's been a lot of studies about things like procrastination, and I'm not going to go into presenting something fully right now, but when it comes to procrastination, one of the main primary root causes, it's not just somebody who says, oh, I just kind of lose track of time. It's actually just negative emotions. So we actually sometimes put off doing things because we know that engaging in that task is going to increase me in negative emotions. So for example, if I have to work on an essay and I know that the moment I open that essay, I'm going to be lost. I'm going to be confused because I got to research. I got to put my effort in. I got to try hard. All of these things are generally negative emotions that I'm going to try to run away from. And so I'm just going to put it off and put it off and put it off. So our inability to cope with negative emotions is going to result in procrastination. And so now if we say that there's already an increase in negative emotion for so many of us, then it's no wonder when somebody tells you, hey, be productive, you don't want to do it. But this is where I want to reconsider things. Where is the source of positive emotion? If we're saying that there's a lot of negative emotion, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given us, inbuilt in who we are, a source for positive emotion. In one of the hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, beware, there is a piece of flesh in the body. If it becomes good, the whole body becomes good. But if it gets spoiled, the whole body gets spoiled, and that is the heart. This hadith really encompasses something important. And there's many hadith, of course, that talk about the heart and talk about positivity and whatnot. But really, I want to bring it into to exactly what we're talking about here. The heart, when it is reformed, the heart, when it's purified, the heart, when we are actively making an effort to keep it clean, it ends up resulting in more positivity and more khair and more goodness in every single thing that we do, period. That your ability to cope with negative emotions, your ability to cope with external difficulties, your ability even to just have an increased drive towards khair, this comes from the healthy heart. The same heart, or the difference in heart could be the difference between two people looking at the same thing, one person feeling debilitated by it and the other feeling motivated by it. And again, I want to mention this cautiously, right? We are not saying this to say that if you feel down or like you're in a hard in a hard place or depressed, that this means that your heart isn't good. Absolutely not. But what we're saying is, if we are trying to improve our ability to cope with challenges and negativity and all of these things, if we're trying to improve that, then one of the primary sources that we should be working on is the heart, inshallah ta'ala. So I'm saying this, and I'm saying this because I didn't go into the technical aspect yet of productivity, but because it's important to frame first. If we want to be productive in anything in our life, start with productivity towards the heart. And quick hadith. This is a hadith Qudsi where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my servant draws not near to me with anything more beloved but my religion. Let me say that again. My servant draws not near to me with anything more loved by me than the religious duties I have enjoined upon him. And my servant continues to draw near to me with the supererogatory works, so that I shall love him. All of that is simply to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that the way that we come near to him and more love to him, first and foremost, the thing that he loves the most is the fara'id, the obligations. So that means the simple things that we don't consider to be a big deal, the things that don't necessarily give us that big spiritual boost, right? When we go to Taraweeh, we feel that high because we're like, yo, I just did something that was, voluntary and extra, and I put so much effort. It gives you that big boost of kind of, a spiritual boost. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us right here that we start and we really establish that love to him, the things that nothing is more love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's those obligations. The obligations. So what are the obligations that we have? Of course, it's the first and most important ones are the salah. These are the deeds that we're going to be showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I don't want to hear any conversation about productivity that doesn't begin with reassessing our relationship with salah. That's the foundation. Everything else, to me, ends up, if you're neglecting the salah, everything else is highly likely that it is rooted in the ego, it's rooted in the nafs. And that's why you might have people who sit in these, $1,000 productivity courses and listening to all these things. And it's like, they're so productive making all of this money, but it's like, is that really actually productive? How are we actually defining what productivity is? Start with the baseline of being productive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your heart and your relationship with him. Start with the obligations. Then you increase in the sunnah. And the reality is, it's those sunnah, the extra things that you do. That's what ends up, inshallah ta'ala, strengthening your relationship with the obligations. Think about it simply. If you pray all of your sunnah prayers, what's going to happen if you have a low point or a bad day? You might drop sunnah prayers, but it's going to be a bigger leap to go to the point of dropping the actual obligation. Because even when you take it a little bit easy, you have these layers of defense, right? So another aspect of this, of course, is the wudu, right? Remembering wudu as an actual obligation for us. We have to mandatorily clean ourselves before we go to pray. Do we treat wudu as this extra thing that just goes into the salah, or do we actually take our time, focus on our wudu, take a few moments, do the dua after the wudu, etc., etc. And then to now, maybe somebody is listening to this and they're saying, well, my obligations are fantastic. Check out this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said about Abdullah ibn Umar, one of the greatest of companions. He said, Abdullah is a good man. I wish he offered the night prayer, tahajjud. This was the Prophet ﷺ's way of advising and motivating him towards increasing in a specific ibadah. And there's just something beautiful about that. There's something beautiful about the Prophet ﷺ saying, I wish that somebody who's already amazing would do something that's just a little bit better, to make them even better. This is, subhanAllah, like this is about Abdullah ibn Umar, right? That even somebody of that high status is being encouraged in a positive way by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just if you do this, you'd be even better. You're already good, but this would be even better. And so actually taking into consideration right now, our ability, especially if we are in, let's say, an easier, more privileged position than other people, is taking this opportunity where we have different, a kind of rebuilding of our schedules and whatnot. Is there a way for me to fit in an extra act of ibadah, an extra page of Quran, an extra rak'ah, an extra sunnah? Is there a way for me to do this right now? There's a window for khair right now that for many people didn't exist. Going back to the idea now of improving the heart, we talked about salah. Right now, many of us are at home with our families. Invest in your family. Your siblings, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you siblings, your siblings are really just temporary roommates. You're with them right now for a few years of your life, and in the future, you're going to be apart. And if you've never had time away from your family, then you might not appreciate what that actually means. Maybe you say you want the relief, but in the future, you realize how much of your norm has been shaped by the people that are around you. Furthermore, of course, I want to siblings. Now I want to go to the higher status. The parents, our parents, so often they want us to do things, or they want to, something from us, and we say, hey, we have school, we have work, we have whatever. Now, if we have more time, this is the opportunity. How do you improve your relationship with your parents? Maybe you don't talk to each other. Maybe you have a parent who isn't very emotionally expressive. take this as an action item. Try to spend some time where you just sit with your family, just sit with your parents and do nothing. Don't bring your phone, don't bring whatever, and just sit. Just be like, yo, what's up? What'd you guys do today? What'd you guys watch today? Maybe you offer them something. Maybe you saw a funny video or something interesting. Maybe it's something that you would normally send or share with your friends. This is the opportunity now for you to share it with somebody else, for you to be like, hey, to my parents, I want to improve. I want to show you what I like. You might think that they won't be interested in it, but you're taking steps now, inshallah, to improve in that relationship. Silat al-Rahim. Ask your parents now. Maybe you're at home now and at a time where you see your parents calling their own parents, that your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, whoever it is. Silat al-Rahim, this is from one of the responsibilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put upon us, to connect with our relatives. Maybe you don't speak that language very well if they speak a different language. Maybe you haven't talked in a long time. Honestly, a conversation with them is simple. It's just basic small talk. How are you guys? I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. Oh yeah, we miss you too. What are you guys up to? How's this person? How's this person? All right, is there anything I could do? Jazakumullah khair, guys. It was nice to see you. Assalamu alaikum. Just small things like that. What you're doing is you're planting seeds of love in these relationships. You're showing a level of care, even if you don't know necessarily yet how to nurture that relationship further. Although one of the ways that we mention is, for example, sharing things that you've seen, sharing things that are interesting to you, asking people what they're doing, what they're interested in, what their day has been like, what did they eat, what did they watch, etc., etc. So I just want to touch on those aspects of obligations in terms of the ibadah, in terms of salah, in terms of our relationships with our families, because I swear, if we set these as actual practical goals, everything else is going to come into play in an easier way. So just to wrap it up, because I know we're running low on time, we have to do the Q&A, but nobody has messaged me, told me to get off yet. So I'm just going to mention quickly things that you could do now. Once we've established that baseline, we reframed the challenge, we worked on our heart. Now we're trying to say, we set our spiritual goals. Now, what about the other goals that we have in our education, in our career, in our fitness? There's obviously a lot of different goals that we can have for ourselves right now with this added extra time. This is the opportunity, if you have that extra time, inshallah, to really be working on yourself. What I would say is, in terms of, for example, managing your time, one of the best things that you could do for yourself is get a daily planner. You can do it electronically. You could download online, for example, an agenda or a planner. You can use apps. But the important thing is actually planning your day. And you can plan your days ahead of time. The general thing that I like to do is planning my rough sketch basically for a day. So I say I'm going to wake up at, let's say I'm going to wake up at 7 a.m. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to have I'm going to do my adhkar. I'm going to read my Quran, whatever, and I'm going to set, for example, 2 hours, 3 hours. Here's 3 hours for this section. Here's 2 hours for this task. Then, as you go along throughout your day, reassessing that schedule. If you changed something, if something new got in there, basically just add it in. So you can basically put kind of like 2 columns where you're going through your day hour by hour and putting your rough sketch and then what actually ended up happening, kind of your revision. It's a way for you to become more mindful of where your time is going, being aware, just seeing these things in front of you, seeing I spent 3 hours today on my phone. And inshallah, it's, we're spending, less than that, but I'm very aware that a lot of us, our screen on time has gone way more than that for a lot of reasons. But if you said, hey, I spent 4 hours today on the phone with somebody, or I spent, whatever, seeing that should make you face a reality that otherwise you might have ignored because you just, had it in the back burner. You didn't acknowledge it. But basically going back and reassessing where our time is going helps us plan moving forward. If you set a goal and you weren't able to reach it, actually writing down, get a book for yourself. Be like, here's my goal. I want to read 3 pages of Quran every single day for this week. Maybe you set a goal for just this week specifically. If you weren't able to do it on a certain day, explain why. Was it something that was in your control? Was it something that wasn't in your control? And if you don't like writing these things out, you can literally just open a voice recording app on your phone, your computer, whatever, and do a review basically of your week. Do a review of the goals that you set and why you weren't able to reach them. Just having this dialogue changes your ability to lie to yourself and to deceive yourself and to say, oh yeah, well, I wanted to, but things happened. No. Spell it out. What exactly happened? What is it that got in your way? Because when we set our goals, one of the most important things, everybody has heard of, I think, of SMART goals. You can look that up, SMART, SMART goals. It's how to set, basically goals in a productive way. But one of the important things about that is that the goals actually have to be measurable. You have to say, listen, you don't want to just say, hey, I want to read more Quran. No, tell yourself, I want to read 2 pages of Quran every single day, 1 page of Quran every single day. I want to do my adhkar, my morning and evening remembrances. I want to try to do them 3 times a week. Okay, maybe you don't do them at all. Maybe you set that stage. What ends up happening now is your ability to then set that goal, review that goal after a week, for example, if that you set that time period, or two, it gives you the chance to then adjust in the future. Maybe you put 3, maybe it didn't work this week. Like next week, set the goal to be 2. That doesn't work, just do 1. But the idea is setting a goal of something that you want to accomplish, holding yourself accountable, and then readjusting the goal as you move forward, inshallah ta'ala. One thing in terms of actually organizing your time is make note of things that can potentially delay what you want to do. If you know I have to work out for 1 hour, don't put your workout in your calendar to be 1 hour. No, account for some of the kind of the lagging the lagging behind that you might do afterwards or before. Give yourself an hour and a half to do a task that takes 1 hour. If laundry, for example, takes you I don't know, it takes you 30 minutes to fold your laundry. Tell yourself, I'm going to give 45 minutes. That way, you don't constantly feel like you are creating a schedule that is impossible for you to keep up with. A schedule is not meant to make you feel bad. It's meant to make you feel organized and structured. A schedule that is stressing you out is a schedule that you will not end up keeping up with. You want to set a schedule in a way that makes you feel accomplished. So for example, maybe you put a few easy tasks in the morning, before your brain kind of really gets going, before you put the harder ones. And in general, something that I think is really important for us to do, have a daily regular commitment with the Quran to the best of your ability, even if it's half a page, even if it's 2 lines. But to commit yourself to reading those words. Just those words alone are a source of cleansing for you. They're a source of strength and protection for you. Even if you're not able to memorize anything, just having that regular relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is the hadith, and I'm going to paraphrase it, and I'm going to kind of wrap up over here, that the best deeds that we do are those that are consistent, even if they are few. So even if you don't feel like this is a big deal, there's the barakah in the consistency. We pray every single day. As one of the benefits of praying every single day is developing consistency, developing discipline. This is what allows us to then set goals and other things that we do in our life. You know better than me what goals you need to set. You know what your challenges are. But the important thing is to take the same principles that are used to improve in the other things to, inshallah, improve in these goals. So I can go on for a lot longer, but forgive me, this was already far longer than I intended. Barakallah fikum.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Tareq, for those very practical pieces of advice that each of us could really implement in our time. I especially like how you presenting the framing of productivity before our attempt to tackle it. Productivity for different people means different things, and another element is no matter how productive you are in terms of worldly means, it's also important to engage in our relationship with the Quran and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Jazakallah khairan for that wonderful speech and for the presentation of some wonderful practical tips that we can incorporate. So inshallah, we'll be moving on to the Q&A session. Like I mentioned a couple times earlier, participants of this webinar had the opportunity to type some questions for our speakers and engage and participate in a dialogue with some of the topics that they were presenting. So our first question is to Sister Hanaa. Sister Hanaa, one of our participants or one of our viewers asks, in addition to renewing our relationship to the Quran, what other books do you recommend that we should read during this time, not especially since we have some free time? Hand it over to Sister Hanaa.
Okay. Reading for me is such a personal thing. So I'm going to try to give just some ideas about what you can do. Everyone's interests are different. Everyone's areas of growth and areas they want to explore more are very different. So in terms of the Quran, I think that's the best place to start, like this questioner asked. And not only just the Quran, but really looking at the tafsir, reading commentaries if you can, especially if you're not a native Arabic speaking person. I think for me, especially English is my first language, so I always go to tafsirs and translations that I can really understand and really grapple with and dig into. So I have one particular tafsir that I really love. That's the Bilal Phillips. He has a commentary on several surahs that you can either purchase or they have PDFs online that I suggest anyone who's interested in reading more dig into those. Reading about emotions and anxiety are really good. I just finished one called Calming Your Anxious Mind, written by Jeffrey Brantley, and it's really good and kind of encapsulates a lot of the conversations we had about how to settle our nerves and to really focus on what we can do, what we can control in this time right now. If you don't have a Goodreads account, I suggest everyone who's interested in reading more, Goodreads has hundreds and hundreds of books. It's like a Facebook for readers. You can join, see what other people are reading, get suggestions, because once you start with one title, you'll find 5 others that are kind of linked to it. So that's where I suggest everyone who's interested in reading, go get a Goodreads account. Anyone wants to add me, you can add me on there, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Hanaa. Our next question, one of our viewers would like to ask Sheikh Yousef, I really want to develop my relationship with the Quran during Ramadan and during the quarantine. Should I focus on memorizing the Quran, understanding it, or finishing the...
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, Ronnie, I think I didn't hear the last part of the question. You said memorizing or...
Yes. So the second part of the question is, should I focus on memorizing the Quran, understanding it, or finishing the entire Quran?
Okay, so I'm going to try to have a general answer because this is a little bit subjective, because the 3 things are actually required somehow, right? So we need to memorize some parts of the Quran, we need to understand the Quran, and we need to read as much as we can in Ramadan. So they're not actually contradicting, but I understand that the question is about priorities. So honestly, it depends more on the situation of the person, how much Quran he knows already or she knows already, and what's their situation with the memorization, is it easy or not. But as a general answer to this, so in Ramadan, you're actually committed to read as much Quran as you can. There are 2 major schools about the 2 different major opinions in history and the tradition of the Salaf, of the scholars, that some of them would recite multiple khatmas in Ramadan, some of them would finish Quran every 2 or 3 nights, and some of them would actually try to ponder and reflect more on the meanings more than that. I think what fits to our situation nowadays is that we need to balance both, because it's also a very big shaitan trick that, yeah, you don't really need to read much. Quran is about understanding, and it's about tadabbur. You need to understand what you're saying. You're going to just like repeat words. No, there's actually a merit of just repeating the words of the Quran, even if sometimes you do not conceptualize the exact meaning. So this is one of the shaitan tricks, that do not focus on reading, just understand or try to understand. And we finished the month of Ramadan and we barely read a couple pages, right? So it's a very common problem that we actually face a lot. What I would suggest, again, this general answer is try to balance both. If you think reading 1 juz or 2 juz, whatever, as much as the person can read, is actually too much per day, and again, this also subjective based on the ability of reading Quran, I would make a bit less and ponder, reflect, or try to read more about the meanings of the words or the tafsir more. Or I would actually divide it as I have 2 different words or schedules. So I have the schedule of qira'ah, which means I'm going to read this number of pages a day, for example, even if I'm not really understanding what I'm reading, right? And I'm going to have 1 page a day that I'm going to read the general tafsir or the occasions of the revelation, as Bab al-Nuzul about this, or whether it's an advanced book of tafsir or something very general or very basic. I would have 2 words in Ramadan. One for qira'ah, it's just going just all the way towards the Quran, hopefully, inshallah, you have 1 khatma at least, and one for reflection and tadabbur, that will be 1 page a day, 1 ayah a day. It depends actually on the person's ability.
Jazakallahu khairan, Sheikh Yousef. The next question is for Brother Tareq. This viewer would like to know what advice you have to get out of a slump, especially when it comes to schoolwork. This viewer says they have not been able to get themselves on track with anything since the quarantine started.
So I would say the first thing that you want to do is reassess what your actual goal is. So defining what getting out of that slump is first, right? So if you've set for yourself a big, overwhelming task, you say, listen, I need to, let's say, I need to read this book, right? You're looking at that book as a big task, as something that's probably overwhelming, stressful, etc. Try to break that down, right? Try to break that down into something that is smaller, something that is more achievable, manageable, and give yourself a time to do that. So if you tell yourself, because if you're saying, for example, I can't do anything, well, to me, I'm like, well, you need to change then what those goals are. Because, for example, you're listening to this live stream, right? This live stream is not exactly a movie. This is something where we're trying to be held accountable to learn something. This is something that already shows that you have a level of willpower, that you have a level of effort that you're willing to put in to engage in something that isn't necessarily going to bring you entertainment value or kind of escapist value, but actually something that you want to use to orient yourself in a more positive and productive way. So if you've already established that that you could do this, then it's like, okay, طيب, now maybe you want to say, I want to, instead of read a book, I want to read the first page. And I'm going to make it measurable. I'm going to say, I want to read the first page and I want to make sure that I do it by today. Okay. Then you want to measure that tomorrow, inshallah. Be like, okay, if I still wasn't able to do it, why is that the case? Why was I not even able to do something that I understood on a rational level I was able to do it? If there was something that, that got in your way, that wasn't out of your control, that's understandable. But if you just said, well, I just ended up not being in the mood, to me, it's saying you need to maybe warm yourself up by setting some goals with things that you are maybe more inclined towards doing. So for example, maybe you want to set a goal of, I'm going to try to call one of my friends. I want to try to call them. Maybe somebody who something that isn't necessarily just about having fun, but something that is about kind of setting a purpose. Or maybe you say, I want to, wash the dishes. Maybe you don't wash the dishes at home. Maybe you say, I want to volunteer to wash the dishes. Something that isn't enjoyable, but you maybe need to retrain yourself just to get back in the mode of setting a goal and accomplishing it, and writing these goals down, putting them somewhere visible, and making them clear. That can make a difference. At the same time, you also want to consider for yourself, maybe one of the reasons why you're not able to do anything is because your body is exhausted. Maybe you are, not eating healthy. Maybe you're not sleeping healthy. Maybe you are, going through something emotionally that's making it hard for you to actually, resolve this issue. If you're able to reach out to somebody that you can actually talk to and work through some of those emotions, that might be helpful. If you're able to improve maybe your sleep a little bit, right? All of these things, you're trying to kind of holistically look at it and be like, where can I remove the excuses that I've been giving myself to not do something that I know I'm capable of doing? You know what I mean? Because maybe on some level, you haven't been able to do it till this point because you feel like you can't. And so break that down into something that you know you can. And then inshallah, you should be able to see some progress, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan, Brother Tariq. The next question is actually an open question for any one of our speakers. So if you feel like you want to answer it, go right ahead. It says, being around my family all the time now has revealed a lot of tensions in our relationships. What can I do to ease this and be better with my family? And again, that's open to any of our speakers. Is there anybody that wanted to go ahead? Brother Tariq?
All right, so I'll say something. I will say I sent a message in the chat and I said, Sheikh Yousef, go first, but I don't think he saw it yet. So I'll say that one thing that you want to try to do is to recognize which battles are kind of worth fighting and which ones are not. From one family dynamic to another, there can be, a lot of differences. For some people, for example, we know unfortunately that there's been an increase in things like domestic abuse during this period of isolation and lockdown and whatnot. And so there are obviously some things that will require professional help, professional counseling in order to resolve. But there are things, of course, then that are a little bit more minor that you're actually able to address. And the first thing I would say is don't try to resolve these issues in the heat of an argument when people are upset, when people are worked up or angry or emotional about something. You want to try to find an ideal time to discuss it, and maybe make sure that you're the right person to do it. So for example, if you've noticed that there's tension between your mom and your dad, for example, and you see that they're yelling at each other, you're not going to start yelling in the middle of that conversation, be like, you guys have to resolve this, the kids are watching. No, that doesn't work. But for example, if maybe you notice that you notice that a sibling, for example, has been upsetting you, bothering you, whatever. Maybe you want to, depending obviously on the scale of what's going on, maybe the right move is to try to bear it in that moment, let it kind of pass, and then come back later in a better situation and try to actually resolve it. Try to at least talk it out. Be like, yo, when that happened, that was uncomfortable for me. That was annoying to me. That was upsetting to me. And these are things that maybe before we were able to kind of brush or kind of push under the rug. But now with more time together, for a lot of people, they're being forced to kind of resolve these issues. And at the same time, it also means that there's more opportunity to build and nurture these relationships. So, for example, if there's tension between you and one of your siblings, it's, there's the opportunity for you to offer more khair and plant seeds of goodness there. There's a lot of people right now that are facing, the loss of siblings, the loss of family right now. And so one of the things that, you might hear is that one person might be upset with somebody in their family, but once that person is sick or injured or passes away, may Allah protect you guys and all of your loved ones. Once that happens, it's like, man, that wasn't worth it. Like, I don't care about it that much. It was just upsetting in that moment, or you wanted to, revenge on somebody for something in the moment. But, when you look at it in the big picture, it's not really worth it. So, kind of knowing which things are worth letting pass and which things are actually important to talk out could be, helpful.
I just want to. Sorry,
Sister Hanaa, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to add to what Tareq said. I think it's important to also identify that a lot of the emotional turmoil that we're having in our homes right now, it's coming from a need. So just like we talked about how we have our own needs, we have to recognize that people in our family have needs too. So if somebody is irritable or maybe is combative in some way, you might say that that person needs space or that person needs some validation from you. So I think it's really important that we are not only compassionate with ourselves during this time, but also with people that we're living with, so that we can support each other, because we all need each other a lot right now. So it's important that we're able to see that in each other.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Tariq and Sister Hanaa, for those great answers, mashallah. Next, we have a question for Sheikh Yousef. Sheikh Yousef, are we allowed to pray Taraweeh alone at home, or does it have to be prayed at the mosque? How can we pray Taraweeh at home if I don't have much of the Quran memorized?
Jazakallah khairan. That's actually a very important question. I'm glad that was brought up, because there are a lot of common questions about this. So, number one, Salat al-Tarawih is Sunnah. It's a recommended prayer. It's not one of the obligatory prayers. Number two, there is a disagreement among the scholars. Is it something obligatory? It is something, that is Sunnah to be in a jama'ah as a congregation prayer or an individual prayer. And there are the two opinions, but either or, they both permit to be individual. They were talking about what is the preference. Is it better to be in a jama'ah or not? But either or, of course, you can pray individually. And actually, some of them said it's better sometimes to pray as an individual. And the Prophet ﷺ, he did both. So no, the short answer is you don't have to pray in the mosque. If you want to pray at home and you do not have much Quran memorized, you have a couple options. The first option is you read it with as much Quran as you have, even if you have very little, even if you repeat an ayat and you have the intention to have to basically reflect more on the ayat, or some people just like to repeat ayat out of mahabba, out of love to the ayat. There's this kind of tadabbur that we neglect sometimes, which is called the tadabbur al-mahabba, the reflection of love. You read the Quran with the intention that you are loving the words because they are coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though you're not able to conceptualize all the meanings of the words. Or the other option, which a lot of people I think would go for, is you read from something. You read from the Quran, you from a mushaf, or you read even from a phone app or something like that. This is also permitted to be in the salah. There's no problem about this. Just try to avoid any excessive moving, because that might invalidate the prayer. But it's okay to read from something like Quran, an actual copy, or phone app or something like this.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yousef. Another question to Sheikh Yousef. Will you be conducting any programs during Ramadan?
Yes, inshallah. So there will be a couple of programs. So the first one is we're going to have a new series, inshallah, with Al-Majlis. So the current series with Al-Majlis is the Mysteries of Prayer. They were supposed to be 4 sessions that were done already, but we extended it to 2 more sessions until the beginning of Ramadan. We have 2 more sessions to go, one tomorrow and one Wednesday, Sunday and Wednesday at 9 o'clock, to finish and complete the chapter of the Mysteries of Prayer from the book of Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah. Then we're going to start another course in Ramadan on Mondays and Thursdays. The announcement will be sent, inshallah, maybe in 1 or 2 days, about stories from Ahlul Bayt, or stories from the family or the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We didn't announce this yet, but this is what we are planning to hold, inshallah. It's going to be 20 to 30 minute sessions, inshallah, short sessions on stories from the the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, we decided with Windsor Mosque to live stream the Tarawih prayer every night, inshallah, from the masjid. Of course, it's not going to be a jama'ah, it will be just basically imam and muaddin or something. So we're going to live stream the Tarawih every night. So we're going to have a khatam and compilation of Quran at the end of Ramadan, inshallah. So you can tune in every night of Ramadan at 10:30, which is the time of Isha, and we're going to have Salat at Tarawih, inshallah. I think those are the main programs. And also the chaplaincy. I still have the virtual counseling appointments for counseling, inshallah, virtually through Zoom. We have it every Tuesday and Friday. You can book it through the chaplaincy website or directly from the calendar in Calendly, inshallah. So those are the main programs. And I think there will be more programs to be held in the community by the Imams Council and the Windsor Mosque and the other organizations as well, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yousef. The next question is more of a request, and it's specifically for Sheikh Yousef, but I think I'm going to open it for everybody. This viewer is requesting Sheikh Yousef, and again, I'll request from everybody that they make dua for this viewer's family to come back safe from Morocco. They have been stuck since February 25th, 2020. So inshallah, if you guys can include them in your dua, that they have a safe arrival and a safe return to Canada. The next, let me just see here. The final question for Sheikh Yousef, and you spoke a little bit about it in the previous question, but if you can elaborate more. With the Ramadan coming up and praying Tarawih at home, can we hold the Quran in our hand while leading our family members, or is this specifically when you're praying by yourself? And to elaborate on that, does the app that we read have to be in Arabic, or can it be in English, or can it be in a different language?
Okay, so the first part of the question, the permissibility of holding something in the salah is not restricted particularly to the case of being individual or being in a jama'ah, being an imam or being a ma'mum. It doesn't matter. You can do both. Again, the general requirement is excessive moving invalidates the salah. So you try to limit your movements only to just if you're turning the page, basically, or you're just scrolling down to get to the next page that you are reading from. But no, there's no difference between imam or ma'mum. For the second point, so there are a couple points here. The first one is, if you're reading, the recitation should be in Arabic, so that means the mushaf has to be in Arabic. If it has like something in the margins or something, or maybe both Arabic and English, for example, or a different language, this should be okay, but it shouldn't distract you a lot from the fact that you are reading, because the reading in salah is a ibadah in itself, right? So when you are reciting Quran in the salah, that means you are performing an active worship in your by your recitation. It's not basically that you are reading a book of tafsir or you are reading something else beyond the Quran. So you need to, of course, you need to reflect and ponder and stuff, but the main point is that you're actually performing an active worship. So try just to keep it limited to that. If this is on the margin, I don't think it's a problem, but if it's distracting you a lot, I think we need to be careful with this. The other thing is, I said the two options are okay with a mushaf or a phone app. The problem with the phone app, make sure that you basically turn off all the notifications and all these things, so you do not keep going back and forth with other things, because that might invalidate your salah. You need to have only the phone app, the mushaf app open, and that's it. So you keep your salah valid, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yousef. This concludes our webinar, but I want to take this opportunity and present some concluding remarks. First and foremost, to thank our speakers. I think that these interesting times have been a unique opportunity to show how close of a community we are, and how much opportunity and togetherness that we have. So I wanna thank each and every one of you for coming out and being a part of this webinar. Actually, we just got one last question, so I'll insert that just really quickly. It's to Sheikh Yousef again, just speaking about the Tarawih. Is it allowed to pray along with the Tarawih being live streamed or happening on the radio? Is that permissible? This viewer is asking.
So this is one of the most common questions these days. So the short answer is no, you cannot have the live stream to be the imam, basically, and you're following it. You cannot do that. You can listen to it, of course. You can listen to the recitation, but your salah has to be performed individually, because you cannot have a jama'ah with that much disconnect between you and the place that has the imam. I understand there are multiple videos going on, and videos posts on social media, and probably some also people of knowledge are talking about this. But what most of the modern scholars have actually agreed on is this is not valid, and you cannot pray based on radio or live stream or something like this, because the condition of a jama'ah is not actually fulfilled here. So basically the connection, the main point of a jama'ah is the connection between you and the imam, and there is a requirement to physical connection in terms of the place that contains you both, or there is at least an accessibility, direct accessibility to the imam. This is the legal fiqh side of the situation. So short answer is no, you cannot do that. But of course, it's good to listen to it and to keep a kind of a spiritual connection with the recitation, and the masjid, for example, that you used to go to. It's something nice that we keep connected with our mosques, inshallah, spiritually.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yousef. Like I was saying, I just want to conclude this event by thanking all of our wonderful speakers for coming out, carving time from their busy day to present advice and to connect with us and have a conversation about our experiences during this quarantine and during this experience. Secondly, we have to give a huge shout out to the Windsor Islamic Youth Council for putting this event together. The countless volunteers that have orchestrated and together this event. May Allah reward you immensely, and truly thank you for keeping us all connected during this time. Just a couple of notes. If you missed any part of the webinar, or perhaps there was somebody that was unable to watch it, the full video, inshallah, will be posted on the Youth Council's YouTube page very shortly. As well as Real Talk is releasing a short video reminders with tips and advice from local youth every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can watch them on their social media platforms at Real Talk Windsor and on their YouTube channel as well, inshallah. As well as to make sure to follow the Windsor Islamic Youth Council on social media to keep up to date to all the Ramadan programs that, inshallah, we will be having, as well as any future youth events. I want to take this time just very quickly to request all of you to make dua to all of our frontline heroes that are working so hard right now. I'm sure we all know personally, or be it close to be it a family member or somebody that's close to us that's going out and sacrificing their safety so that we could be healthy and well at home. Be it doctors, nurses, grocers, truck drivers, law enforcement agents. They're going out there every single day. So inshallah, keep them in your dua as they're working really hard and doing amazing things. Lastly, I think I speak for everybody. In fact, I think I speak for the leadership of our community when I say that we truly are all in this together. And if any of you need anything at all, please reach out, be it to the Youth Council, be it to the chaplaincy, be it to the Windsor Islamic Association, whoever it may be. Know that you're not alone in this experience, and that inshallah we're virtually and in any way possible, we're here for each and every one of you. Second last thing I would like to say is happy Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. Inshallah, this is an amazing Ramadan for everybody. And like it was mentioned earlier, hopefully you guys can engage in a lot of these programs and these webinars. And although we're not there physically, our hearts are attached, and inshallah we'll be blessed with the reward and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for engaging in these important events. Lastly, I wish you and your family and everybody that's listening to this wellness and happiness. This is a true test of tawakkul, our tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We hear that word very, 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 very often, but this is a true testament of how we can put our affairs, and we can dedicate ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He knows best. And I wish each and every one of you happiness and wellness. And Jazakallah khairan for checking in. And we really enjoyed having you this evening, and hopefully we can see you soon. And with that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.